Okay, let's have a look at the system menu. The first entry here is control panel. That's just the page we are on. It's that landing page to the backend. The next entry is global configuration. This is where you can set the configuration for your site. So if you want to rename your site, you could do that here. If you want to take your site offline so that people can't access your site at the moment, you could do that here. You could type a default message. Yeah, let's say for some reason you want to do a backup, and you don't want the database to change while you do the backup. You could take your site offline, or you might want to do an update or something like that. So if you want to take your site offline, you can just do it by clicking here, and when people visit your website, they will then get this message. You can show them an image when you're offline. You can decide on various other settings for your site. For example, that WYSIWYG editor we were talking about earlier. What you see is what you get. By default, it's this tiny MCE editor. If there are other WYSIWYG editors you prefer, or any other editors you prefer, they don't have to be WYSIWYG, you can pick them here. You can also install additional editors. And you can pick a default capture. I don't have any captures installed. You can set whatever the default access level is. Yeah, but I only want my site to be public. I don't have special articles, and I don't want to say my site by default should only be for registered users, so I just leave it. You can change the metadata of your site, SEO settings, all sorts of things here. For example, use URL rewrite, add suffixes to URLs. So if you want the URL in the address bar to look in a specific way for whatever purpose, you could deal with that here. And you can see that very often in Joomla there are different tabs here at the top. So that was the site tab. Now there's a system tab. This is the path to my log folder. If I want to store log files, they go into this folder. This is the help server that serves my help files. Yeah, and very often you can just hover with the mouse over one of those entries and you get some additional information. You could turn off cache. You could turn on the cache. By default it's disabled. So we looked at PHP in the past, and basically every time you've got a visitor coming to your website, the PHP code will run. It will retrieve information from the database, and it will combine all those bits of information it collected, and it will create an HTML page as an output that is being sent to the visitor. And the idea is that a lot of those pages that are being created are actually the same. Yeah? You might have to ask the database to do this and that, and you might have to do that 100 times a day, but those 100 times, when people access exactly the same page, the database and the PHP code, they all have to do exactly the same thing. So instead of basically assembling every single page from scratch, you could turn the cache on, which means the first time your system assembled all those details and made them into a page, the system will store the way this page looks like, and next time someone wants the same page, instead of reassembling the page from scratch, the system will give them the page that has been created earlier. And here we can then set how long is this cache valid. So especially if you've got lots of visitors, turning the cache on could help create make the workload on your server much lighter. And what else do we have? Server settings, path to the temp folder. When you upload things or when you do certain things, they go to a temp folder first. So you can set up where that folder is. Some servers basically support the page being zipped up and being sent in a compressed way to the visitor. You can turn that on. You can tell the system what time zone your server is in. You can change your database settings, your mail settings. You can change the default permissions. You can filter the content that your visitors enter in the system. So if there are certain HTML tags you want to allow or you don't want to allow, you could set that up here. And what else do we have? Articles. So now we can set the system settings for all our articles. You can see there are many more tabs here for articles, for cache, check-in, Joomla update. Let's look at this one. So there are countless options, but we don't really need to concern ourselves with those. Global check-in. If a user starts working on an article or on a menu or whatever it might be, this part of the system will be locked so that two users can't edit the same area at the same time. Otherwise, they might override each other's work. So what can happen is that people use the back button by mistake, or their system crashed, or they just stopped working on it and turned their browser off. And if those kind of things happen, then you can have areas of Joomla that are still locked. They could be locked for many weeks because someone once started editing that specific menu or article or whatever it might be. But because they never told the system that they have finished, the system keeps those bits of the system locked. So you can basically check in those articles. Yeah. So every time you start editing an article, it will be checked out, so others can't start using it, and you can check in all the articles that are locked, all the items that are locked out if you want. And here, clear cache, clear expired cache. That's useful if you use cache. System information. Yeah, it tells you information about your system, about your PHP, about your configuration files. This might be quite useful if you want to do an update on your server, or if you have the option of updating your server, but you're not sure whether your version of PHP, your version of Joomla can work with this new version. So if you ever want to look something up, which version of Joomla do I have, which version of PHP am I using, or whatever it might be, this is where you can look it up.